interesting class, as I mentioned. What we're going to talk about today is the progression of Jewish law, and from a very interesting perspective. Not going to cover everything, of course, but will give us a new insight into how we have laws that we have, and we're going to get there. This journey is going to begin from the Pesach, the Korban Pesach. So, although it's not Passover now, but it's relevant because it's mentioned in the Parsha this week. That is that the Jewish people were in the desert, and God commands us on the 1 year anniversary of Passover that we should celebrate Passover. How? By bringing a Paschal lamb. So the verse says in Numbers chapter 9, verse 1, Vayidaber Hashem, it's on your source sheet on page 1. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe, and God spoke to Moses, B'midbar Sinai in the desert Sinai, Bashon Hashem, the second year when we left Egypt, the first month, saying, Yasu b'nei Yisrael, the Jewish people should bring the Paschal lamb, the sacrifice for Pesach, in its appointed time. What does it mean in its appointed time? Bring it on Passover and not on Rosh Hashanah? What does in its appointed time mean? When else should we bring it if not bring the Passover sacrifice when? The 14th day of the month in the afternoon. You should do it in its appointed time. With all in accordance with all its ordinances, you shall offer it. And Moses tells the Jewish people have to bring the Korban Pesach. This is what we have to do. This is how we're going to celebrate today. We got it? So the one question we have now is, what does in its appointed time mean? It says Rashi, b'moyeda in its appointed time, af b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Okay. What does it mean, even on Shabbos? So the idea is as follows. This year, the first night of Passover was what night? Who remembers? The first Seder was?
Weekend.
Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night. That's exactly relevant to the class today. Okay. If Saturday night starts the holiday of Passover, in theory, that means that, not in theory, but that means that Saturday, Shabbos, is the 14th day of the month of Nisan. Passover begins the 15th day of the month. So the day before Passover is the 14th day of the month. On the 14th day of the month of Nisan, the Jewish people are commanded to bring a Pesach offering in the Holy Temple. Then we would take that home with us, and that's what you eat on the night of Passover. So it's brought in the afternoon of the 14th day, and it's eaten that night, which is the beginning of the 15th day. You got it? That's how the system of Pesach works. Now, what happens if the 14th day of the month is Shabbos, like this year was Shabbos? Do you bring the Pesach offering on Shabbos or not? Now, what's the question? So some background. There are two types of offerings brought in the temple, general offerings brought in the temple. One are called, the first category, communal offerings. The second category is called personal offerings. Communal offerings, for example, every single day of the week, there were two offerings brought. The morning, the first offering in the temple, and the last offering in the temple in the afternoon was a communal offering. Who paid for it? The community. They collected money once a year, half shekel. That went into an account, went into the coffers, and every once in a while they would take money out of there and buy animals. And no one was there except for the Kohen. The Kohen did it on behalf of the Jewish people. So it was a communal offering. Shabbos and holidays, we have an additional musaf, an additional offering. These were all brought every single day of the year. Every Shabbos, there were offerings brought in the temple. Because communal offerings override the Shabbos. Personal offerings don't override the Shabbos. If
There are no personal, right? On Shabbos, you don't ask for personal.
correct, that's separate from this, but somewhat related in the fact that on you sin, you have to bring a sin offering. You can't bring it on Shabbos. You want to bring a peace offering? You can't bring it on Shabbos. So the question becomes now, what is the category of the Pesach offering. And we'll see that there is great reason to make an argument to say that it's a communal offering, and there's a good argument to say that it is a personal offering. But before we get there, we're going to introduce a story in the Talmud. One of the more famous stories in the Talmud because of its relationship to Pesach falling on Saturday night. So the story goes like this: Tanur Rabbanan, our rabbis taught from the tractate Psachim, page 66a. Halacha zunis alma b'nei Beseira. B'nei Beseira was the family that they were the sons of Beseira. That's what it means, and they were the people that were we'll call them the highest court, the highest ruling people. They stood at the top of the Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin. They were the leaders of the Sanhedrin. Pam achas chol arba osliyis b'Shabbos. It happened once that the 14th day of the month of Nisan fell on Shabbos. Shachachu, and they forgot, v'lo yodu, they didn't know. Im Pesach doiches Shabbos or lav. Does the Pesach offering override the Shabbos or not? Amru, they said, Klum yesh adam sheyedeya. Does anybody know im Pesach doiches Shabbos im lav if the Passover overrides the Shabbos or not? Amru lahem, they told them, Adam echad yesh olam bavo. There's a certain man who just came up from Babylonia. The Hillel Bavli Shema, his name is Hillel the Bavli. He served the two leaders of the generation, Shema and Naftalion. Shema and Naftalion were the leaders of the Zugos of the previous generation, and Hillel spent time with them. He knows. He would know him Pesach, Doiches, Shabbos, and Lav if the Passover offering overrides Shabbos or not. So they sent for Hillel. They called him. They tell him, do you know? Yes or no? Does it override the Shabbos or not? Amar Lahem, he tells them. It says in the Torah the word Moedah, and it's appointed time by the Korban Pesach. We just read it, and it says Moedah in appointed time by the Korban Tamid, which is the daily, steady communal sacrifice. Ma Moedah Shabbos, just like the Korban Tamid, the daily sacrifice overrides Shabbos, and the Torah says Moedah is a soti where it says Moedah by Pesach, it overrides the Shabbos. Miyad, so right away, they seated him at the head. They made Hillel the leader of the Sanhedrin, the leader of the High Court. When he became the prince, the leader over everyone. And that whole day he darshan, means he gave the sermon on the laws of Passover. The one who gave the sermon on the Shabbos before Passover, that was considered to be the leader. So they appointed Hillel right then and there. They said, Hillel, you know this. Wow, you're in charge. That's it. You're in charge. And Hillel became the famous Hillel that we know from then. This is the famous Hillel. This is how he became the leader of the court in Israel. Okay. So now that's the story. Okay. So we're going to have a very big question on the story in a moment. But before we get to the question of the story, let's get to what's the logic behind the question? In other words, what's the argument that can be made either way? So let's read. The debate over whether the Pesach offering can be brought on Shabbos is related to the question of whether it has the status of a communal offering. On one hand, since it's brought in a group setting, and all Jews bring the offering at the same time on the eve of Pesach, it has the characteristics of a communal offering. So, for this reason, some argue it should be brought on Shabbos just like the regular daily offering. So what's the reason why it's a communal offering? Because all Jews bring the offering, and it's all brought at the same time, on the same date. So every Jew has to bring a sacrifice on the same date. That's like very similar to a communal responsibility. If everyone has to do it on the same day, a lot of resemblance to a communal sacrifice. On the other hand, it's still considered an individual offering. This is why each person must pay their own Pesach offering, unlike communal offerings which are funded from the temple treasury. Additionally, its status as an individual offering is underlined by the fact that it can only be eaten by those who registered for it in advance. There's also a law that it cannot be brought by one large group. So this, I'm going to give you a little background. How does the Pesach offering work? So it works like this. Every single adult had to have a shear of at least one kazayas. We'll call it an ounce of meat. 1 ounce of meat. Minimum 1 ounce of meat. You can eat a lot more than that. However, there was not allowed to be any leftovers. No leftovers allowed. So if I tell you, Brandon, You have to bring a Pesach lamb, a lamb as a sacrifice for Passover, and have to eat by the Seder. What are you going to tell me? Can't have any leftovers. We can't eat a whole lamb in one night. I mean, are you crazy? Like, how are we going to do this? Oh, the way you do this is a few people get together. You make a group. Each one has to have at least a share of 1 ounce in the lamb of meat in order to be able to fulfill their obligation. So everyone pays in, everyone chips in, everyone buys in, and this lamb becomes the offering for this group. If you weren't part of the group, you can't become part of the group later. So if someone knocks on your door, Pesach Eve, and says, "Oh, can I have a piece of meat?" Sorry, I give you a piece of meat, but not from the Korban Pesach, because the Korban Pesach could only be eaten by those who were registered for it. To register it, you have to buy in. So everyone, that's how they have to make estimations. How much meat can you pull out of such a lamb? How much meat can we eat? How many people can come together? It depends on the size of the animal, and that's how they did it. Let's say you had a group together of 20 people for a lamb. Now you go to the temple, and you would bring the offering in the temple. How did this happen? All Jews came together to the temple in the afternoon. They divided the Jewish community into 3 groups. They stuffed the temple courtyard, packed everybody in, and locked the door. As many as they could fit in, they locked the door. And this was the first key to the first group, and everybody brought their sacrifice. They did their thing. They were exited, and then the second group entered. They stuffed everybody in, as many people as they could get. They locked the doors again. They did the ceremony. They left, and then they put the third group in. It was never that they never needed more than 3, because some say miraculous, but this was unbelievable how many Jews they were able to stuff in at the same time. So that's what he's saying over here. So it has the characteristics of a personal offering because every person has to pay for their own Pesach share, and it can only be eaten. It can't be eaten by someone else. Only if you're registered in for this animal. Only if you're part of the group could. So it has. It's not really a communal sacrifice. Communal sacrifice is for literally everyone. This is not for everyone. It's just for a group. So it seems it's very personal. And also, it wasn't brought in. It wasn't brought in a manner of everyone together bring it. It had to be divided into 3 groups. So again, that's division. That's not full unity. So because of these factors, some argue that the Pesach offering is not like the regular daily offering, and therefore does not override the Shabbos. So everyone can see how you can make an argument both ways. Like this Pesach is like in limbo. You can logically say why it's a communal offering, and you can logically say why it's a personal offering. There's reason to say for both. So here's the big question. Here's the big question. How is it possible that they forgot the law? This wasn't the first Passover. It's impossible at that time. It was impossible to go through 14 years in the Jewish calendar without having Shabbos, Erev Pesach, be on Shabbos, fall on Shabbos. The 14th of Nisan fall on Shabbos. You couldn't go 14 years without having this come up. So, these weren't 14-year-olds that never lived this. These were the greatest sages of the generation. They forgot what happened 14 years ago. At max, it was 14 years ago. Maybe it was only 4 years ago. Who knows? What do you mean they forgot the halacha? They have to go. Anyone know the law? What do you mean? What does that even mean? And nobody knew the law. Could you imagine? It wasn't like something that was done in private. Every Jew had to participate in this. And they made a call, and nobody, there's one guy, he just came off from Babylonia, he knows. How is this possible? How does this story make any sense? Logically, it doesn't make any sense. So the Jerusalem Talmud asks this question and answers, really the whole story was only it was like a scheme by God, so to speak, to make Hillel become the great leader. It was all just put in place to make Hillel the great leader. That's why it doesn't really make sense, because it was really strings were being pulled from above. But the Rebbe says that could be, but still, I mean, it's such an extraordinary miraculous event that no one remembered. Like, if you want to say like a few rabbis forgot, that's like on the level of miracles. It's a very small miracle. A few people forgot. But something that's so out there in the public that every single Jew had to participate. To say that every single Jew forgot except for one would seem to be a very big stretch. Just in order to say that Hillel should be, it's like such a massive miracle just that Hillel should become the leader. There's easier ways to get Hillel to become the leader than doing such a far-reaching, miraculous event.
Excuse me, laws were being written down at that time, not as extensively, but
Laws were not being written down. This is before Mishnah. This is before the Mishnah by a good 200 years.
So Hillel lived
100 years before the destruction of the temple.
Hillel lived around, the first part of that millennium.
Hillel lived probably about 2,100 years ago.
Yeah.
Roughly, not exactly.
Right around, yeah.
Okay. So this is the question that we're going to address. Some try to make an offering to suggest that they manipulated the calendar, that Shabbos should never be Erev Pesach, the day before Passover, just to get around this. But it's a stretch that they would to say that they try to manipulate the calendar because there's no writing about this. There's no mention about this anywhere that they would manipulate the calendar just to make that it shouldn't fall out on that day to run into this question. So it seems that this is what happened, and it seems like there must be something else over here happening that we're missing. So the Rebbe once explained a very brilliant analysis of this, and that is as follows. How is it possible for there to be a disagreement in Jewish law about a mitzvah that happens all the time? A constant mitzvah. I'm going to give you an example. When it comes to tefillin, you put on a pair of tefillin. Do you know that there are 4 opinions on how the inside of the tefillin, the head tefillin, are supposed to be? There are 4 different opinions.
That what's written?
What's written inside is everyone agrees. But there are 4 sections in the head tefillin. Each one has a scroll with a passage of the Torah in it. In what order are the passages placed in the tefillin? Rashi has an opinion. Famously, his grandson Rabbeinu Tam disagrees with him. And then there's also Shimush Rabba and the Ravid, 2 lesser known opinions. But there are 4 opinions into how the tefillin is supposed to be.
So
and each one says that the other one is no good, the other one's wrong.
What are Hasidim?
The Hasidim, so the Halacha, the law, follows Rashi. So everyone puts on Rashi's tefillin. Those that are more pious put on a second pair of tefillin, Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. Those that are extremely pious put on all 4 pairs of tefillin every day. There are those that put on 4 pairs of tefillin every single day. So the main tefillin you put on is Rashi. There's also Rabbeinu Tam. What's the disagreement? The disagreement, Rashi says that the verses are in the way they're written in the Torah. So you have the 4 passages as they are in chronological order, starting from the middle in the book of Exodus. There are 2 sections from the book of Exodus, and then there are 2 sections from the book of Deuteronomy. So it goes the one that's earlier in Exodus, the one that's next in Exodus, the earlier one in Deuteronomy, and then the later one in Deuteronomy. Rabbeinu Tam says no. Put Exodus, and then the 2 middle ones both start with the word V'hoya. They're next to each other, and Shema is always all the way at the end, even though Shema in the Torah is written before V'hoyim Shema. It's a little bit of a difference. Same passage, different place. My simple question. You're arguing over how tefillin are supposed to be made. Go to your grandfather's tefillin, open it up and see how it's inside. Then you'll know. Rashi. Go to your grandfather's tefillin, open it up and see what's inside. Go to your great-grandma. Go to your father's tefillin. Before you open your mouth and say, oh, this is how the tefillin are supposed to be made. Why don't you go look, how were the tefillin made up until now? And you'll see how tefillin are supposed to be made, right? How do you have an argument about this? It's a mitzvah that's been going on for 1,500 years already at that time. Where is it this not 2,500 years, I'm sorry. Where is the disagreement? How do you have today, we wake up with a disagreement between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam? 2 separate pairs of tefillin. What are you talking about? How did they do it for 2,500 years? We have a mitzvah of tzitzis. If you have a 4-cornered garment, the Torah tells us, if they put tzitzis, strings on the corners. How many strings go in each corner? So there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, like this, it's a brisa. Our rabbis taught, how many strings do you put into the tzitzis? Beis Shammai says 4. Well, Beis Hillel says 3. You put the 4 in, and then you fold it over. How many you have? Put 4 into a hole, and then let it hang down. How many strings are you going to have?
Oh,
How do you have 12?
I don't know.
8. If you fold 4 in half, you're going to have 8 strings, right? So if you look at the tzitzis today, you'll see there are 8 strings in the tzitzis. It's really 4 strings that are folded over the garment that become 8. Beis Hillel says you need 3, which would mean you have 6. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai arguing? This is a mitzvah at that time was going on for 1,500 years. How were the tzitzis from the times of Moses? Go look at a pair of tzitzis and see. You're arguing if it's 4 or 3. Go look at a pair of tzitzis. Go take a talis from someone's, I don't know, that's 50 years old. It's 100 years old. The 200 years, they surely had a talis around from a long time ago. And take a look. How did Jews always do it? Before you guys started arguing, how did Jews do it? Right? That's the same question we have now. What do you mean we don't know what Pesach? How did we do it 14 years ago? How did we do it 28 years ago? Why is there a question today whether the Pesach overrides Shabbos or doesn't override? History will tell us exactly what it is. History will tell you how to make a talis. History will tell you how to make a tefillin. How could it be that we're disagreeing, that we debate and we disagree these things? So the answer is as follows. The Gemara says, the Talmud says, in Yevamos, page 13, top of the second side, Talmud says like this. There was a Beis Shammai means the Academy of Shammai, and Beis Hillel means the Academy of Hillel. And there was a period of time, and they disagreed a bunch. There was a period of time where Beis Shammai, the Academy of Shammai, practiced according to its rulings, and Beis Hillel, the Academy of Hillel, practiced like its rulings, like according to their rulings. In other words, each group did and followed their rabbi. This one says 4 strings. They put 4 strings, for instance. This one said 3 strings. So my rabbi says 3 strings, and that's good. So I go with 3 strings. So now if I come and I ask you, well, what's the law? Is it 4 or 3? Then we'll go take a look at a pair of tzitzis. What did I tell you? How is taking a look at a pair of tzitzis going to help me? Some pairs of tzitzis have 4, some pairs have 3. Some talis have with 3 strings, some talis have with 4 strings. So how do I know what to do? Nevertheless, although this one practiced following their rabbis, and this one practiced following their rabbis, it didn't prevent them from marrying one another. In other words, they got along with each other, even though they had different traditions, they had different teachings. We see this the most clear today. There is such a concept which expresses itself on Passover when it comes to eating kitnius, beans and rice on Pesach. For an Ashkenaz Jew, kitnius is like chametz. We steer clear of it like it's chametz. For certain Sephardic Jews, they have no problem eating it. So the Ashkenaz Jews who doesn't eat kitnius on Passover you will never eat rice. It's like chametz on Passover, right? But after Passover, no problem eating in a Sephardic guy's house. Then you have a kosher home. There's no problem. We could eat in your home. No problem with intermarrying with your family. Why? Because you're following your rabbi, your rabbinic tradition and line that goes back many, many generations. And I'm following mine. And that's okay. So you want to know, can you eat kitnius on Passover or not? Right? How am I supposed to know? Well, today we follow based off of where you come from. If you didn't have a tradition that you do eat it, then you're not allowed to eat it. We'll get to that in a moment. But my point is that there is some type of reference to this idea that we have even today, where you can have a group of Jews that are doing something right according to their halacha, their law, even though another group says what you're doing for me is incorrect and it's wrong. And they both live as fine, perfect Jews in 100% observance, with each one doing according to their tradition. Until this is the way it could be for many generations. It can be for a few generations. It can be for many generations. And sometimes it can be for a few years. What changes all of this? What changes all of this is what we would call a psak halacha. It's almost like a consensus among the rabbis. A vote was taken among the rabbis, where we say that there's a certain law that we are going to codify now as law. So up until now, yes, it's true that this one did like this and this one did like that. But from now on, this is going to be the codified law. For example, when it came to the disagreements between the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel, where for a number of years, each one did their own thing. But then at a certain point, the rabbis gave out a ruling that said as follows, that any time there's a disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the law is going to follow Beis Hillel. Pretty much every law has an exception, rule has an exception, but that's the general rule, that if Beis Shammai disagrees with Beis Hillel, we're always going to follow Beis Hillel. So now, if someone wants to know what to do, now all you need to know is, what does Beis Hillel say? It used to be, if you want to know what to do, it was confusing. Well, you had Beis Shammai, or you could go like Beis Hillel. You can choose at this point, if you weren't a follower yet, you can choose who you want to become a follower of. But now that there was a halacha, there was a law that was codified. How was it codified? It was discussed and was debated and analyzed among the rabbis, and a consensus, they came to a consensus, and the laws that we follow the majority, and the majority ruled that this is the halacha. So once they gave that ruling, then forever after that, that's the rule that we have to follow. I'll give you another idea. This may surprise many of you. The Torah says that we're not allowed to cook milk and meat together. Basic law of kosher, right? You can't cook milk and meat together. What about chicken and milk? Can you cook chicken and milk together? So the Torah says, the literal words that the Torah uses for this prohibition is, you cannot cook meat. The Torah doesn't say the word meat, but I'll say the word meat in its mother's milk. From here we learn the only thing that's forbidden to cook together with milk is something which its mother has the potential to have milk. Chickens, their mothers don't have the potential to have milk, so they can't be included in this prohibition, because the Torah clearly says in its mother's milk. So it doesn't necessarily mean its mother's. It can be as long as its mother has the potential to have milk. That's the prohibition. But there is no biblical prohibition to cook chicken with milk. You won't find it anywhere in the Torah. The rabbis came along many years later and said, we're going to forbid eating chicken together with milk. It becomes very confusing. Chicken has the status of meat. So we're going to impose a status of meat onto chicken. And today, for all practical purposes, there is no difference between chicken and milk, chicken and meat. When it comes to cooking for kosher, there is no difference. But there's another opinion. His name was Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, great sage, Rabbi Yossi the Galilean. Read about him in the Haggadah. And Rabbi Yossi HaGlili says that it's permitted to cook chicken and meat in milk. He says, I think it's 100% permitted. The Torah doesn't say it's forbidden. I think it's 100% permitted. And Rabbi Yossi HaGlili cooked chicken and milk together and ate it. And his community did that. He was the rabbi of his community. And in his community, they followed their rabbi, which is 100%. Okay, although in a different city, other rabbis said it's prohibited. In this community, the rabbi said it's permitted, and therefore they cook chicken and milk together. So the Gemara says a story. Levi, one time, he went to a house in Rabbi Yitzchak Lili's community, and they served him chicken with milk, but he didn't eat it. He didn't eat it. It's not kosher for me. He came back, and Rebbe, his teacher, said, why didn't you excommunicate those people? Why didn't you scream at them? You're eating not kosher. What are you guys crazy? What are you doing over here? You should excommunicate the people that eat chicken and milk. They're going against the clear ruling of the rabbis. So Levi tells his teacher, it was in the community, this story happened in the community of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. And I said to myself, it's very possible that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira taught the same way Rabbi Yossi Aglili taught, that it's permitted to eat chicken and milk together. And since their rabbi said it's permitted to do it, I can't excommunicate them. They're not doing anything wrong because they're following their rabbi who's relying on Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who was a very good source to rely on. So what do you see from this story in the Gemara? What you see from here is something fascinating. You can have a community that says cooking chicken and milk is kosher, and another community can say cooking chicken and milk is not kosher. That all existed for a number of generations. You had Rabbi Yossi Aglili's generation, you had the Yehuda ben Beseira's generation, you had the next generation, but at a certain point, I don't know exactly what the date was, but at a certain point, they coalesced, the rabbis came together, they discussed it, and they gave out a ruling that said that it's forbidden, chicken has the same status as meat. And once that happened, today, chicken and meat have the same status. And if someone decides that they're not, I'm going to rely on the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, no, now we'll excommunicate you for that. Now you're going against the ruling of the rabbis, now you're going transgressing a halacha. Once it became codified as the law, you can't change. No, even Rabbi Yossi Aglili would not be able to eat it anymore. He was the minority, he was overruled. So it's like in the Supreme Court, when they give out a ruling, if it's 6-5, 5-4, you have 9, it's 5-4. The four people of the dissenting opinion, they have to follow the law of the 5. Even though they argue, they say you're wrong, and I'll prove that you're wrong. Doesn't matter, you still have to follow the law. Even you who can prove that I'm wrong has to follow the law of the majority. Even Rabbi Yossi Aglili today is not permitted to eat chicken and milk together. But that's the progression, that's how the laws came out. So we're beginning to have a picture over here. And the picture that emerges from all of this is God gave Moses the Torah at Sinai. And when God gave Moses the Torah at Sinai, God gave Moses also the method to study Torah. And God wanted to use these tools, everyone to use your brain to put the methods that I'm giving you and how to study Torah, put it to use and try to figure out the meaning of the verse. And once that happened, everyone had the right to come along and give an opinion on how the laws have to be followed, as long as you can back it up with words of Torah. You can't come with your own ideas, but if you can back it up with Torah, if it fits within the paradigm of studying Torah, you have a right to come with your opinion. And you can follow your opinion. As long as there hasn't been a consensus, as long as there hasn't been a vote, or however it was made, however it was ratified and codified into law. Until that happened, as long as you're following the Torah way, you can have a different opinion than someone else, and your children and your family and your community, anyone who relies on you, will follow your opinion. And this happens until this very day. For example, every single Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. Can't carry anything on Shabbos. If you want to carry on Shabbos, there's one way how to do it. You have to build an Eruv.
What?
An Eruv. It's called an Eruv. An Eruv is a string that goes around, or a wall that goes around a certain space, and that makes that everything in the space becomes now one domain. So the Eruv literally means like a bringing together of. So it brings together everyone in the space, now becomes like a private space, so you can carry within the limits of the Eruv. There's a massive debate that goes on until today. Can you build an Eruv in Brooklyn or not? There are limits on the laws of Eruv, where you can and how you can. It's very complicated laws. Some of the great rabbis of the past generation, namely Rav Moshe Feinstein, he said that you're not allowed to build an Eruv in Brooklyn. He said a lot of things are permitted to do in life, but one of the things that you're not allowed to do is carry in Brooklyn on Shabbos, because even if you put up Erev, the Erev is not kosher. It's impossible to make a kosher Erev in Brooklyn. The law of Erev goes all the way back to the days of Solomon, that you can carry with an Erev. However, in Brooklyn, in this location, for whatever reasons, you cannot make an Erev. Other rabbis said you could make an Erev in Brooklyn. And until today, what do you have? There's an Erev. And people carry, and some people don't carry. Some people say if you carry, you're transgressing Shabbos. The other one says if you don't rely on the Erev, then you are denying the law of Erev, which is like denying the whole Torah. And this debate goes on till today. Here, just one example of where a follower of this rabbi will follow his rabbi. There is no halacha today, consensus among everyone coming together to debate and analyze this anymore. So what do I do? Can I or not? You have to follow your rabbi. Your rabbi will give you halacha, a ruling, whether you can or you can't. And they may be very different. And different communities will have different opinions on the Erev. So this is where, even till today, you have this, and many other areas of Jewish law as well. So from here, you see the big picture over here is like this. It's possible to go through generations of different opinions within Jewish law without coming to a final ruling that's binding onto everybody. Now let's get back to our story and we'll see how everything makes sense over here. The Bnei B'Seir, who were in charge of the Jewish community then, the rabbis, the leading rabbis in charge of the community then, they knew very well if you were to ask them, does the Pesach override the Shabbos or not? You know what they would tell you? They would say, let me give you a little piece of history over here. Some communities say that Pesach overrides the Shabbos and therefore they bring the Pesach offering on Shabbos. Some rabbis say that it's forbidden because it's like a personal sacrifice and therefore you're not allowed to. So they don't bring the current Pesach on Shabbos. And if you go around and look, you'll see certain Jews are going to tell you 100% yes, and certain Jews are going to tell you 100% no. So the Bnei B'Seir didn't forget the law, what was going on. What they forgot was, did we ever come to a conclusion about this? Was there ever a consensus reached? Was this ever ratified into law? That they forgot. That there are different opinions, and this was going on for many generations. Of course they knew the history. The question was, more recently, does anyone have information that actually clears this subject up, that we can make it just one ruling for everybody? And for that, the Jews said, we didn't know. But Hillel, he may know. You know why? Because Hillel spent a lot of time with Shammai and Naftalion. They were the Jewish leaders of the previous generation. So if they came out with a ruling, that would be binding onto everybody. So when Hillel came along and he said, yes, I have a tradition from my Rebbe, Shammai and Naftalion, that became now the standard to everybody. Not everybody knew it. Only Hillel knew it because he was there. He was around. Most Jews had no idea. It wasn't the age of anything written down. There was no libraries to go to. There was no internet. There was no Google. There was no Wikipedia. So very few people were in the know about what Shammai and Naftalion said and did in their rulings. Only if you were in their court when they gave the ruling. And it happened only once in 14 years maybe. So it's very easy for a ruling like this to be forgotten because it wasn't relevant for so long. So they said it, they gave out the ruling, but you forgot because I didn't know what to do. So Hillel was the one that remembered, if this person remembers all the teachings of Shammai and Naftalion so well, he deserves to be in charge of the Nasi, the prince, the leader, the chief justice. That's why they put him there. Because he had all this information they realized that other people didn't have. Now the whole story makes sense. And the same thing is for Rashi. When we put on tefillin, it's the same thing. Before the days of Rashi, if you'd open up a pair of tefillin, maybe it was Rashi's tefillin, maybe it looked like Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, maybe it looked like Shemush Rabbah, maybe it looked like the Ravid. You know why? Because there are different opinions, and Jews wore different types of tefillin. The tefillin were the same, but the order of the portions were different because there were different rabbis with different schools of thought on what to do. And that went all the way back to Moses, maybe. And by the way, if Moses gives a ruling, you're allowed to argue on Moses. It's a strange religion that we have. Not me and you. But back then, after the Torah was given, if the colleagues of the Sanhedrin said, we think differently than you, Moses, they had a right to present their case to debate with Moses. Because Torah was given to humans of flesh and blood that have physical human minds, and that's the way God wants the Torah to be studied. As the Talmud famously says, Torah lo b'shamayim. Torah is not for heaven. Torah is given to mankind. So it's very possible that all the way dating back, you could, Rashi said the school of thought like Rashi that traced itself back for 1,000 years and 2,000 years before. They said all the tefillin are no good. Bury them. They're all not good. And the school of thought, Rabbeinu Tam, he said, oh, that was Rashi's tefillin. They're all no good. Bury them. They're all no good. So if you found a tefillin buried, open it up. Wherever I open up is not going to give me any indication of what's right and wrong over here. Because there were multiple opinions, and for years, that's the way the Jews lived. Just like with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. The academies for a number of generations followed their rabbis' rulings until there came a time where we said, no, now we're going to come together and give a final ruling. And that's the way it is today. Today, everyone follows Rashi. Rashi is the halacha. The law follows Rashi's opinion when it comes to tefillin.
When did Rashi?
About 900 years ago.
14?
No, earlier, 1200s, 1100s, maybe even beginning 1100s, I think. I believe around then.
In Paris, right? He's French or he's
Forget now where he was born. So you have a whole history over here. And same thing when it comes to the talis. You want to know how many talis? What's the law for talis? How am I going to know? From the times of Moses, some people put 4, some people put 3. And they were both fine. Until we came along and said, no, the law follows, actually in this case, not like usual, this is the exception to the rule, follows Beis Shammai. We have 4, makes 8 strings, even though usually we follow Beis Hillel, but in this case we follow Beis Shammai. So you see in all questions of Jewish law, how we get to today, not everything we did today, that for us it's simple, for us it's basic law. Was it so simple and basic in previous generations? Not necessarily. Some things yes, some things not. And it's possible to have, for us, what is such a given that this is the way you practice Judaism, it's possible that many years ago it was debated. And certain countries or provinces, they followed their rabbis. And like I said, kidneys is the best example of this. Rice on Pesach and beans. A whole swath of Jews living in one part of the world, they had kidneys, no problem. The swath of Jews living in the other part of the world, they said this is chametz, we're not going to touch it on Pesach. And until today, 1,000 years later, you have this divide. We can love each other, we could celebrate together. Not on Pesach, we can't maybe have the same foods together, but every other day of the year, we can enjoy each other's kosher food, no problem. And we can marry, no problem. And everything will get worked out. Because this is the way the Torah is given over from generation to generation. So I hope that today we have a little bit of an understanding of the progression, we'll call it, of Jewish law, and how the story of the Korban Pesach, whether it overrides Shabbos or not, actually opens for us a whole new understanding into other laws and how we got to where we're holding today. And at the end of the day, disputes among the Jewish people is inseparable from our identity. This is just who we are, and we're going to continue to debate and analyze everything. And we accept. We could be in the rink. You could be outside. In the rink means that you're one of the rabbis that are pushing a certain perspective, what you feel is the correct thing from a Torah perspective, and you debate it fiercely, and you believe in it 100%, and you can follow your opinion also 100%, up until the point where the majority of the rabbis say that you're wrong. And at that point, you have to, with humility, follow their ruling and not yours. There's actually a story in the Gemara where a rabbi didn't follow and he fasted for 40 days, did the tshuva, because they thought that he followed his own opinion and not the opinion of the majority that disagreed with him. So we have to respect one another. We have to love one another, even though you may do a little bit things different than I do. So if you carry in there, if I don't carry in there, if you do this, I know certain things, yes. But everything has its point where after a while, the generations of the Jewish people will come together. There will be for everything a point where people come together and they ratify and put things into a uniform law for everybody. And some things take longer than others, and that's fine. It's part of the process. It's all part of the process of evolving to understand what exactly the halach is, what exactly the Jewish law is. Anyone have any questions today? Anyone online with anything to comment?
No, I liked it.
You liked it. Okay, thank you for that comment.
I liked it. That's good. We don't hear about that, how that happens.
Okay, then we gotta find new material. We can't give the same thing all the time.
Go into it, turn it and turn it.
Exactly right. Okay, everyone, have a good evening. Good night. Great to see you all.
Thank you. Thank you.